Demolishing the Jungle, the migrant camp near Calais dismantled by the French government, dashing the hopes of thousands who dreamed of reaching the UK. How far have European governments come towards a common immigration policy? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Sami Zeidan. It's called the Jungle and was home to around 8,000 refugees and migrants until Sunday. Now the makeshift camp near Calais is being emptied, ready for demolition. The port of Calais in northern France is less than 50 kilometres from the English coast. Most in the jungle had hoped to cross the English Channel to start a new life in the UK. But instead they're being bussed to alternative refugee camps across France. David Chater reports from Calais.
The French authorities have been using a softly approach. Neither the French riot police nor the bulldozers that are expected have come in. It's just been municipal garbage collectors trying to pile back into their lorries all the rubbish that's been left here over the last year. Very few people have been leaving. The queues outside the processing centre have been small. They've been distributing leaflets here, trying to persuade them, tell them what's going to happen, tell them what's facing them. The 450 reception centres around France that have been prepared for them. But there's still the case of something like 3,000 refugees here in the camp who are not moving, who want to stay and defend their ground here. So potentially a difficult problem for the French authorities. The riot police might have to be used to completely clear all the tents in this area to make sure nobody's inside them before the bulldozers can come in and the demolitions start. This is David Chater for Al Jazeera English Inside Story.
Let's bring our guests into the show. We have joining us from Geneva, Leonard Doyle. He's the spokesman for the International Organization for Migration. And in Berlin, we have Julian Lehmann. He's a researcher at the Global Public Policy Institute and author of the book Shipwreck, the Failure of European Refugee Policy. Welcome to you both. If I could start with Leonard, from what we've seen so far, does it look like the demolition of the camp is being planned and executed properly?
I think this time they're trying to get it right, and a lot of efforts and resources have gone into making sure that the most vulnerable migrants who are there, these are the unaccompanied minors, maybe 1,000 of them, are being well looked after and cared for, and in fact brought to new homes, some of them in the UK, about 200 at least. And I think what we're really seeing is a final recognition by both countries that the open wound of Calais, of the jungle, is creating its own dynamic, is affecting the broader body politic, and in fact, has become a much more important political issue than it probably is a practical issue, given the relatively small numbers who are there.
Political implications, very interesting. We'll get into that in a moment, but if we could continue with this theme. Julian, from what we've seen so far in terms of preparation, rallying resources, how confident are you that the thousands of people in that camp are going to be properly transported, housed, fed, clothed and so on?
Look, I agree with Leonard. It looks as though there is a significant investment on the part of the French authorities to close the camp in a smooth way. So far, we haven't seen any clashes. But let's wait until the end of the day, and let's wait also until the people who I understand are unwilling to leave the camp, of which there is about 2,000, are asked to leave. So the situation may also change, as we've seen in the past. There have been clashes in Calais repeatedly. So let's hope that the French authorities are well prepared to handle that this time, and that it doesn't escalate as so many times before.
Leonard, this isn't the first time that we've seen camps cleared. What typically happens to people? Do they end up coming back and forming new camps elsewhere?
Well, that's the danger, and that's certainly what's happened in the past. They've moved up the road towards Belgium and the like. I think in this case, the French authorities have been planning it for some time and have instituted a series of camps in effect, or shelters, nationwide, where they've got systems in place where the local authorities are ready and prepared to accept these people. I think that's the big difference, is that this time the French authorities have taken it seriously, and they recognise that simply allowing people to wash up in Calais and to become a problem for the British authorities, if you will, in particular blocking the tunnel and the like, isn't good enough, and it's not a proper policy.
So what policy is, what steps have been taken then, Leonard, to stop people from simply sneaking out of wherever they're housed?
Well, I think, you know, with the end of the jungle, there's nowhere to go. With the end of the support network around it, and with the creation of proper facilities for people where they will be fed and have support and be inside in the wintertime, we'll create enough of a lure, if you like, or of a pull factor.
But don't two-thirds, sorry, Leonard, don't two-thirds of these people want to get to the UK? They don't want to stay in France.
That's true, but if there is no place for them to camp out in Calais, if there are no resources, they might decide that it's in their better interest to be in a shelter.
Okay, interesting. Julian, what's going to happen to these people beyond the immediate term of housing them, you know, clothing and feeding them? Are they going to be processed for some sort of asylum?
I mean, there's now one part of the inhabitants of the camp that is going to be relocated to French communities all over France. And there is another part of the population that is going to be relocated to the UK. I understand there is about 400 minors who have family links in the UK and who can thus go to the UK. Now that obviously begs the question, if they may even have a legal claim, if they have family links to the UK, why is it only possible for them to go to the UK now? Apparently this time around the French authorities have succeeded in finding a solution, have succeeded in sitting down with the UK Home Office and dealt with this in a relatively pragmatic way, in which the UK then ultimately also said, okay, we're going to accept minors being relocated to the UK, and obviously that is too late. I mean, why do we have to wait until situations escalate and deal with it in this kind of ad hoc fashion?
What's your take, Leonard? Are you confident that that there is a process in place to make sure that everybody there gets reviewed properly, gets a chance to make their case as to whether they're a refugee or simply an economic migrant?
I think there's no doubt about it that they're going to get that now. Whether they'll be happy with the outcome is in some doubt. Most of the population there, if I'm not mistaken, the majority are male and they're single, and many will be deemed to be from non-refugee producing countries, although their claims need to be assessed individually. So they're likely to get a negative response to their asylum claims, and then that becomes a question of how, you know, are they removed through deportation or voluntarily? So the outcome isn't necessarily going to be a happy one for those refugees and migrants who are so determined to get to the UK.
And if not managed properly, Leonard, I'll come back to the point you raised earlier. This could prove to be even more of a political, perhaps, hot potato than it has been, right?
Well, I think you put your finger on it when you say managed properly, because relations between European countries, you know, need to be in a partnership, but there's also always the potential, especially for political friction. And we know that France and Britain have you know, years and years of entente cordiale, where it isn't always the happiest. There hasn't always been. And so the Calais camp became a flashpoint for that, and the media used it as an opportunity to, when I say the media, I mean the populist media, used an opportunity really to create political mayhem. The numbers are relatively small, compared in contrast to the tens of thousands who poured through Greece, for example, up into Germany, the million or so who arrived in Germany, which has been absorbed in a far more kind of measured way. Calais became almost an out-of-control story, and to some extent could have influenced the Brexit vote. France may have thought that this was have taken some pleasure in the discomfort in this, but the outcome has certainly been not a great one for Europe. So I think what we're now seeing is a determined effort by European countries, European governments, to manage the process of migrations, whether it's stopping the flow into Greece, whether it's trying to manage the flow into Lampedusa from the central Mediterranean, or indeed closing down the Calais, because they're recognizing that the genie is out of the bottle and the politics of Europe are being affected by it.
All right, so a determined effort to manage this better, Leonard says. Julian, Can we look to Calais as a sort of symbol or result of better coordination between at least France and the UK over the issue of how to handle refugees and migrants?
First, let me reiterate and agree with what Leonard said. It's a very important point. I mean, it's in fact absurd that this is only dealt with now, given that you would think nobody has an interest in seeing these kind of chaos pictures that we've seen from Calais. And the only people who would seem to have an interest are those who want to peddle anti-immigration and anti-European agendas and rhetoric. So you would think that there would have to be such determined effort before. Now, on your question about the future, whether Calais is sort of a signal for a more constructive cooperation between EU countries on the matter of sharing maybe responsibilities, sharing burdens, I would probably doubt it. I mean, what we're going to see in the next couple of months is a review of the Dublin law, which effectively regulates which member states is responsible, which EU member states is responsible to deal with an asylum application on the merits. The Commission proposed a permanent emergency mechanism that would make sure that burdens are shared a little bit more equally, because it operates on a quota, and then once a country has accessed that quota, there is a sort of burden sharing mechanism, and that doesn't seem to be going anywhere in Brussels. So we're seeing different signals. Yes, we're seeing some kind of cooperation in Calais, that's true, but when it comes to the update, if you like, of EU laws, then I'm afraid we don't see anything more progressive coming out of Brussels.
Hang on, Julian, you're clearly doubtful of the future. What about the immediate past? I mean, how much progress have European governments made in the last year, where this issue has been dominating headlines, towards that common European refugee/migrant policy?
I mean, the last year has been mainly about sort of politically firefighting. There is hardly no progress made, I would say, in terms of long-term readiness to deal with higher numbers. It's been mainly about political ad hoc measures. The real progress we've seen in mounting a whole European asylum framework of EU's asylum and immigration policies has been in the years before, where numbers have been a little bit lower and political readiness apparently higher because of that. So the interesting question is what's going to happen now that we see some calmness in the situation, if you like. The immediate politically firefighting is no longer necessary, but we'll sort of get into the deep grounds of Brussels policy making again, with, as I said, major revisions of major laws ahead of us.
Well, as Julian summed up there, the EU has not yet agreed on a plan to resettle refugees in a sort of common way, as the flow of refugees entering Europe has been reduced, so we're told at least, so has the pressure on the EU to finalise a deal. In January, the UN estimated up to 1 million migrants and refugees would cross the Mediterranean into Europe. That's almost the same number as last year. By June, that estimate fell 75% to less than 250,000. Largely because of new EU migration policies to stem the flow. You remember in March, for example, the EU promised to pay Turkey more than $3 billion in exchange for help in preventing refugees from illegally travelling to Europe, we're told. Under the deal, refugees who have their asylum applications denied are sent back to Turkey. In May, EU countries agreed to train the Libyan Coast Guard and Navy to prevent people smuggling off the coast of Libya. And the EU has also outlined plans to pay African countries aimed at slowing migration to Europe. We're told, Leonard, that from the research that came out at least up till June, that the flow of refugees and migrants, the flow of people trying to come into Europe, had dropped significantly. Is that what your information and research shows?
Well, in part. I mean, the flow of refugees in particular coming in through Greece has almost come to a standstill. But that is not the case for people coming from Libya into southern Europe, into Lampedusa in particular. That flow remains pretty much on par with last year. And that's a big problem because most of those individuals are not going to be assessed as asylum seekers and will probably be ordered to leave the country that they're in, Italy, for example. And then many will go kind of live underground and be exploited in the agricultural sector, live very miserable lives, and by no means reach the dreams they'd hoped to achieve. And indeed, it's probably worth recalling that why are they moving? I mean, they're moving because of economic failure at home, because of climate change, because of, at times, political unrest or exploitation. But they're moving because of poor governance in their own countries. And I think at the end of the day, that's where the solution to this problem is going to come from. Population of Africa is growing at an enormous rate, and with economic development comes a desire to migrate. But as the Europeans draw up the bridge against economic migrants, there's going to be a pressure for better governance and a better economy in Africa in particular.
But Leonard, when you said there that the sort of flow coming in from Greece has slowed down or reduced a bit, can we say that's directly linked to that deal between the EU and Turkey and measures which Turkey is now taking to stem the flow of people?
Oh no, absolutely. And this is a deal which was underwritten by some 9 billion euros, much to the annoyance of African countries who are saying, we've been dealing with migrants into our own countries and we've never been supported. For example, the refugee camp in Kenya, the Dadaab refugee camp, the biggest in the world. So I think African countries have been saying, like, if you need to be fair, if you're going to support the Turkish economy with a big subvention like this, what about Africa?
Well, that is a question, Julian. The people that we're seeing, as Leonard pointed out there, and his organisation, of course, monitoring the movement of people, that there hasn't been a slowdown of people trying to come from North Africa. Are those people coming from African countries, or are we seeing a diversionary move by people who would have otherwise have gone through Turkey and Greece, finding that route closed down, are simply heading the other way round, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, predominantly what we've seen on the Turkey-Greece route has been people from Syria. And now obviously there is a couple of Syrians who cannot, or for whom it is more difficult than it has previously been to come to the EU, and there are some efforts, very obviously, to divert onto other routes. So I would think that in the future we will see some diversification, if you like, of the populations that we see in people crossing from Northern Africa to the EU. But let me reiterate also this point of the effect of the EU-Turkey deal. I mean, clearly it's been a combination of two measures. It's been this agreement, or whatever you want to call it, between the EU and Turkey, but it's also been obviously the closure of borders between Balkan countries and Greece. And that has led to a certain reduction of numbers, very true. But we shouldn't also be deceived. The situation in Greece remains quite, like from a humanitarian point of view, remains quite worrisome. So there is, it's still very important for EU states to continue to support Greece in efforts to accommodate people, and not just think the numbers have gone down, let's stop looking at Greece and let's look at only North Africa, say.
That's a good point, the phrase there, let's stop looking at this. And I wonder, Leonard, are you concerned that the sort of attention that this issue got a year ago doesn't seem to be generating the same level of attention this year?
There's no doubt about that. And what's also very disturbing is that the number of deaths of migrants crossing the Mediterranean in particular is at a record. It's over 3,700 now. It's going to surpass last year's figure.
And yet it's grabbing less headlines.
Included people coming, far less so. So last year's included refugees coming across into Greece, but in this year's primarily people coming into that very dangerous route from Syria across into Italy. Very, very dangerous, especially in winter. And the exploitation of migrants in Libya is extraordinarily, appallingly bad. And the risks they're taking and the boats that they're being put in are much flimsier. So there's a huge humanitarian imperative here, which to some extent the Europeans have kind of closed their hearts to, I'm sorry to say.
Julian, it does seem, as you pointed out, that the route from Western Europe has been shut down. What about the European policy and measures which have been taken, or at least spoken about or agreed upon, towards North Africa? How would you evaluate those?
I mean, there's been attempts, at least politically, on the part of the German governments to kind of copy-paste or if you like, use the EU-Turkey agreement as a blueprint also for other situations.
Can it work?
And that clearly doesn't work. That clearly cannot work because the situation we have in Turkey is relatively unique. There is a big population of Syrian refugees already who get some kind of temporary protection, whereas obviously Libya is a extremely volatile state, if you even can talk of a state at the moment, right? So I'm very skeptical about using the EU-Turkey agreement and kind of copying it onto other geographic contexts in North Africa. Now that doesn't mean that we shouldn't support frontline or North African states in their mounting of their asylum systems, for instance, engaging in capacity building in Tunisia and in Morocco. But we've witnessed in the past couple of months and years also that the political appetite in these countries is understandably also limited towards the reformation of their asylum system, given that these countries then feel they're only acting sort of as gatekeepers for the European Union.
Okay, so the EU-Turkey deal can't work for North Africa, Julian says. Leonard, what can work for North Africa? What sort of policies does your organisation say the world or Europe should be taking?
Well, it's a very big question, of course, and it goes to the heart of the issue. But clearly there needs to be economic development, but often with economic development comes migration. People, you know, as they get more education, as they get a better life, they want an even better life and they want to leave.
But
so
that's a long-term solution, isn't
we
it?
Certainly. Well, I mean, we need short-term and we need long-term. And the problem is we've been having short-term fixes and no solutions. So part of what's going on is that we're looking at ways of giving people choices other than the sometimes foolish choice they make, which is to get on the bus in the hope of getting to Europe, where in fact the outcome is going to be probably either sad or tragic, but certainly not the bonanza, not the new life that they hope. Almost universally for those who are coming from Africa and who are not refugees, who are not deemed to be refugees. So something needs to change. They need to understand in some fashion that the choices they're making are probably not in their interest. At the same time, we're not here to stop people or to discourage people from migrating. There is an open border system within West Africa, the ECOWAS. They can move to areas of the region which are economically booming. For example, Nigeria has a tremendously vibrant economy. So at the end of the day, there needs to be a combination of giving people the real story and telling people that the story they hear from smugglers is a lie. The notion that you can come to Europe and quickly get a job and sooner rather than later you're driving around in a fast motorbike or a car sending money home is generally and typically not happening. So, but they believe it because they read through social media that that's probably what does happen. So somehow or other the new media of our landscapes, people consider social media to be the media now, and that's where they get their news. They need to step it up as well and help communicate back that these are very foolish choices that people take by and large. At the same time, we need real economic development and we need real participative governance. All too many countries of those who are sending migrants are really not doing very well by their citizens. There are good reasons that people leave. They vote with their feet to leave behind economic stagnation or blocks in their career path or even the possibility of getting a job. If that doesn't change, they're going to keep coming.
Okay, I bet that's a prediction which we'll live to see come true, unfortunately. Let's thank our guests for now because we are out of time on this show. It's been a fascinating discussion. Thanks to Leonard Doyle and Julian Lehmann. And thank you too for watching. Of course, you can see the show again anytime if you head over to our website. That address for you there, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, you can keep the discussion going by heading over to Facebook. The address there, facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle there is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Sami Zeidan, and the whole team here for now. Thanks for watching and goodbye.